Hello there, this is Fiona, host and main GM for What Am I Rolling, a twice-monthly RPG one-shot podcast. This is a bonus Q&A episode to tide us over to the next one-shot, and it is indeed a very special Q&A, as just last week I had the absolute pleasure of interviewing Lawtor and Panayiotis Lines, the founders of Leyline Press. Leyline Press is a London-based tabletop gaming company which produces indie tabletop role-playing games and sci-fi and fantasy adventure modules for a wide range of RPG systems. Their latest game, Salvage Union, is a post-apocalyptic mech role-playing game, powered by the Quest RPG system. Players take on the role of mech pilots who make ends meet by salvaging scrap within a post-apocalyptic wasteland. These pilots, as well as their entire ecosystem and community, live on a huge ship-like mech known as a Union crawler. Players will range out of this crawler on their scrap-built mechs to tackle the denizens of the wasteland in a constant hunt for salvage to upgrade and to survive. As of recording and the release of this interview, Salvage Union has met its funding goals on Kickstarter and is well on its way to completing a number of stretch goals too. If you're interested, I've put a link to that Kickstarter and to Alid and Panny's other work on the What Am I Rolling website and in this episode's show notes. Let's begin then. So could you tell us a little bit about yourselves? Who are you and what do you do?
You want to go first?
Yeah, why not?
First question's the hardest.
First question's the hardest.
Exactly.
Yeah, so we're Leyline Press. We're a London-based tabletop RPG company. We produce indie tabletop games like Salvage Union, a post-apocalyptic mech tabletop RPG we've just launched on Kickstarter.
Woo-hoo.
And we also do a bunch of modules for lots of other systems, such as Old School Essentials and Mothership, and lots of cool stuff in between that.
I mean, Panny's sort of like, sorry, I'm Alid, by the way. And I also work for, co-founded, I don't know. Well, what are the words? All the words have gone. So Panny also neglected to mention some of the stuff that we've done, I guess, before we did Leyline Press. So probably the most famous one, I think, was the post-Brexit RPG that Panny wrote, Shadow of Mog.
That's a good idea, that post-Brexit RPG.
Post-Brexit.
I'd play that.
That's not hilariously... That's not hilariously niche and is going to date very badly, is it? We were really looking for future sales on that one.
I mean, I don't know. I think people like playing in dystopian futures, or at least a version that's not happening right now. Or a different version. I think it sells. I think it sells.
Yeah, and then on the other side of the spectrum, we've also got Mutants, which is a game about cats with superpowers. So we try and cover. We basically try and cover every niche.
Yes, But for those people who like their dark dystopian political stuff and also cats with superpowers, you've got the
cats
basis
with laser beams. Exactly. Yeah.
So obviously you started Leyline Press very recently as well. So what drove you to start obviously a company together? And right now, what was the sort of driving things towards that?
We met actually working at Modiphius. So we both worked there, and then we both sort of like wanted to sort of set off on our own and do our own thing. So, I mean, we did that. I mean, Panny started with Shadow of Mog, and I went off and made Mutants. We sort of had, other things in progress. One of the things I was working on at the time was Salvage Union, but obviously going it alone was really difficult for me, at least, mostly because, as I was saying earlier, I can't bring myself to send more than one tweet a month, and that's just not really good for publicity. Whereas Panny's really good at that, so I was like, "Yeah, Panny, do you want to hook up?" Sorry, I'm phrasing. Do you want to join forces?
Quite. Join our talents. On a wider note, in that respect, we're both just like massive nerds and have been so for a very long time. Like I started playing Warhammer when I was about 9, in the distant 90s now. Alid, I mean, you tell me you started early. What was your?
I was 10. Warhammer again when I was 10. My friend Mal introduced me to it, and then it's good. Like, it means that you grow up on the straight and narrow. There's never any money for drugs and booze as you play Warhammer. So
it's a different kind of drug, I think.
It is, yeah. Arguably, I'm not sure if it's more or less wholesome in a weird way these days.
Yes, interesting.
Currently my retirement plan.
Yeah.
You can see the massive stack of Warhammer boxes behind me.
I was going to say, again, for the listeners at home, obviously we're recording on Zoom, and obviously, currently I'm in a closet, so I can't complain, but I was just like, what are those boxes behind Panny? And so now we know know, it's just
it's all his 1990s out of print sort of like the lead ones, right, Penny?
Unironically, yes. It's Chaos Dreadnoughts and the like Catachans with their strange faces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, that's a good point before we go on then. So this idea of obviously marketing yourself. So as you said, you've just sort of started Leyline Press and obviously you've done your own stuff. Obviously, Alad, you sort of talked about like you hate social media, like that sort of thing. It's hard to promote yourself.
It's not that I hate it. I'm just not very good at it, and I'm not very what do you call it? I just don't. I can't bring myself to do it. And I think when I did the art for Shadow of Mog as well, because I my main thing is production. Like I really like making things look nice and stuff like that. So Panny is really good at like writing stuff and actually getting people to read it as well. So it felt like it was kind of a good match, right, Penny?
I mean, honestly, like I'm not the huge fan of marketing either. Like in terms of like, I mean, anyone promoting themselves, unless they're incredibly steely, is going to feel a certain inner like pain and cringe at that. But I seem to have some experience doing it. Indeed, I worked at Modiphius and did marketing there, and I sort of had a broad career before that in the non-gaming world, in the real world, as it were, with marketing and media and all that jazz. So
So you just sort of like, sod it, I'll do it. But I think it's interesting because it is true. Like when you are starting out, and certainly I know from a podcast point of view, it's like you just have to go and just signal boost yourself and be like, hello, this is awkward. Here's my stuff. You will enjoy it. I promise. Yeah. It is a guarantee. And I think it is such a hard thing to do. So congrats to both of you on that, just to be like, pushing out obviously Leyline Press and obviously Salvage Union, which we'll go on to in a second. But just to go back, so you sort of briefly mentioned about Warhammer, both of you. So was that your sort of foray into tabletop RPGs, or was there other RPGs that you both played growing up or recently that you were like, this is what we want to do as writers, I guess, and game designers?
So Warhammer was my first foray into like the tabletop world, but then D&D started like hovering in my subconscious. I first remember talking about it when I was about 12 or 13, and then we cracked open the 3.x rulebooks when I was about 15 or so, but we didn't quite get it. And then 4th edition came along, and while it was a bit of a controversial edition of the game, it did help introduce me and all my friends at that time to the game, because it was like super simple, super well laid out, everything made sense. It copied a few popular video games of the time without starting a comment thread, which in a weird way was good because all my friends were familiar with that game. So that's how I got my start in it. And then from that, I went on a weird trajectory, and now I run like really esoteric, old school 80s D&D as one of my favorite editions.
Nice.
Quite the opposite, actually. So I'd never played, I don't think, an official RPG book of any kind until I'd never played D&D until I started working for Modiphius, I don't think. Every RPG I'd ever done was always like a homebrew thing. So it started like when I was 10 years old. Me and my friend at the time used to stay up really late, and we'd have a pad and a pen, and we would just basically take Warhammer 40,000 stat blocks from the miniatures game, and then we would just basically, roll D6s and draw maps and tell stories, essentially. Yeah, so then it kind of developed. So then everything I ever ran really was always homebrew, essentially. So then, when I went to start doing actual sort of RPG designing, I was like, oh, right, okay, now then this is one of the other problems I had when I set off on my own. I was like, oh, right, okay, now I have to develop a sort of 18-month syllabus of like, okay, what are all these games? What is a mechanic? And, actually, oh God, what am I doing? I've decided to make role-playing games, but I have no idea what I'm doing. That was kind of like my thing. But yeah, very much, Warhammer is the gateway drug, right? Especially in the 90s. It was like, because the shops are just everywhere as well, right? So it was like, I lived in North Wales. We didn't have one. We had to go to Chester, which was like 50 minutes on the train. But, we'd do the monthly pilgrimage and, take all the saved pocket money and spend it all on, overpriced plastic. But and that was the thing. I think you'd be hard pressed to find many people, certainly of like my age, I think, whose foray into it wasn't through Games Workshop in some way or another. Maybe like Fighting Fantasy. would be another way. But then they're kind of a little bit older, I think. Maybe I'm not sure. Panny, you'll tell me. He's our resident historian.
They are old, but they're always being reprinted. I mean, I had a set of Fighting Fantasy books as a kid that someone bought me. Like a reprint. So. I
remember reading the Joe Diva Lone Wolf and Cub ones. I was really, really into those. Again, lent to me by my friend Mal. I think I can blame my friend Mal actually for basically all of this. It's like all his fault.
Blame or credit. That's same thing.
Credit.
Really.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
As you sort of alluded to, both of you have had a whole range of sort of topics that sort of in running RPGs. So obviously, like Warhammer, sort of that high fantasy, obviously D&D, and the other homebrew stuff. Is there a particular genre or a particular theme of RPG that you like, whether like really crunchy or really rules light, or a sci-fi or fantasy? Is there any one that you like? Oh, I love running them, or I love playing in them.
Well, I mean, I know what Panny's is, but I'll let you tell yourself.
I mean, I think the crux of like what always drew me to RPGs when I first started playing them was that like you can just do anything. Like there's a boundless fantasy scape here, and the choices you can make can actually like really matter if this world has like structure and rules, and then there's ways to interact with it, and you can like make in a weird way meaningful decisions. So like my preferred systems and games tend to be ones that enhance that, and I really like old school like basic and expert D&D or like old school essentials, which is a remake of that tidies it up a bit. It does all that in a very simple rules light package. Like it really focuses on player agency and exploration and adventure and all the choices you make and all that jazz. And on top of that, I guess I just like a bit of horror and weirdness and esotericism. Is that a word? Yeah.
It is now.
It is now, yeah.
I think, I mean, that was a really long answer, Panny, to say just old school D&D human fighter only. Like, I
have to justify it. If I just say D&D, it's like...
Yeah, I guess for me, actually, the one game actually that I've read really recently that I really, really liked and I thought worked really, really well was the new Alien RPG by Freely. Yes. I really, really liked that. I thought that was
really good.
But then, so I bought the whole thing, and I think the thing actually is, and this is, I think, what I really liked about it was the cinematic that they did. The what was it called? Chariot of the Gods.
The sort of scenario.
The scenario that they released with it as their quick start is absolutely fantastic, and I actually really like that sort of narrativist kind of play, I guess. And I really like sort of short, punchy things like that. I mean, if I'm playing a campaign, I like sort of, just kind of old school fantasy. I like anything I do, actually, what I really like is really trope heavy stuff, because I find that those tropes can just really help cut down on the mental load needed to understand what's going on. So when you use them, cleverly, like not just sort of like, slapping them in and, using them willy-nilly, but if they're used well, then you can kind of actually fill in a lot of gaps, like, or, you can let players fill in their own gaps, and it's usually accurate enough for the sake of playing a game. And also rules that just get out of the way. I'm not really big on crunchy systems, and often, I mean, I know old school D&D isn't a crunchy system at its heart, because like obviously you just make stuff up, but sometimes I feel like that's got too much crunch for me. So when you talk about stuff like 5th edition and things like that, it's way too much for me, sadly. And that's why I guess, Salvage Union came about, because we were sort of talking about, initially came about because we were talking about the new, my friend Mel was telling me about Adeptus Titanicus from Games Workshop. And I was like, no, I've stopped buying Games Workshop stuff because I don't have the money to actually spend. And so I was like, I'll make my own mech game with blackjack and etc. Yeah, that's kind of where it came from. But then it sort of ended up just getting distilled down and down and down, because you start making a mech game and then you immediately start making a tabletop war game, because that's the way like mechs usually work.
Yeah.
And I'd basically written this manuscript, which was kind of like hodgepodge of like various rules. And then I was kind of like, oh, maybe Quest work for, I don't know. And then, so when I joined up with Panny, I basically just threw the whole thing at him and said, Panny, can you fix this, please?
because that's what friends and business partners are for.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, so let's talk about Salvage Union, because obviously on the day that we're recording this, the Kickstarter has gone live, which is incredibly exciting.
That's right, yeah.
And yeah, you mentioned Quest as well, which is the core game thing, which is something we've not played on the podcast yet, but I have had a look at it and I absolutely love how simple it is. So I guess, yeah, from both of your points of view, so give us a brief overview of what Salvage Union is and how does it differ from other tabletop RPGs?
So yeah, Salvage Union is a like post-apocalyptic, very narrative focused mech role-playing game, and I think the main way it differs is that it's purposely designed to be simple and accessible, easy to learn, and you can just get straight into the action without learning a vast array of rules. And we use Quest for that because the core variable, like Quest has basically a D20 variable resolution core mechanic, which means when you roll the D20, sometimes you succeed, but sometimes you're forced into like a tough choice. Sometimes you fail with a consequence. It's that sort of yes and or yes but or no but thing. And what that lets you do within a game and even within a mech game is that when the players describe something interesting, like, you know, tripping over another mech with their huge rigging arm or something like that, you can just go to that core mechanic without having to write like a rigging arm trip rule. And so that's the gist of it. That lets you have simplicity. I mean, layered on top of that, we have like abilities that you can trigger, but again, they're meant to be like super evocative and punchy. So you like press a button and like the enemy mech's legs blow off or their arm comes off or they overheat and explode, rather than, you know, having to worry about armor points and tracking exact heat levels on each of your leg parts and all that crunchy jazz, which I will add is fun and I love that stuff, but we wanted to make something a bit different.
That's fair.
The sort of key thing that I think this was the main design challenge, I think, was kind of going, right, okay, well, let's use a really simple core resolution, but how do we still make it a mech game? So the way we sort of achieved it in the end was by backloading all of the crunch, essentially. So all the vast majority of the sort of the really crunchy mech stuff, which is sort of, you know, building those systems and modules and like, you know, upgrading and, you know, changing out your mech, is all done kind of in downtime. So it's not done as sort of part of the sort of main play, if you like, which once you've done all of that sort of crunchy upgrade, downgrade, you basically essentially you have a list of narrative abilities and you activate them in various ways. Some obviously like there's heat. And so we've got kind of stress tables and stuff so we can start tracking that. So we've got heat stress and then we've got energy as well, energy points or ability points, which is kind of comes from the core quest mechanic, which allows you to do like kind of really impactful stuff during the session. And then the idea behind it is that you just have a list of these things that you can do that are sort of really impactful. And then anything else you can kind of do anyway, for the most part. It's just a case of describe what you want to do, roll the dice, and then we just see like, you know, see what happens. And again, it's one of those things, I think like the first time we played the thing, it just worked really well because it was kind of like, right, okay, you know, what do you really want out of a mech game? I kind of just want to describe, oh, right, okay, yeah, I'm in the, you know, the snipery sort of mech. I want to stand on the hill and, you know, shoot my railgun. And that, you know, I don't necessarily need to go into all of that crunchy detail when it comes to resolving the action as you would in a war game, because it's an RPG. So let's just let that go. And, you know, we sort of bring that, because that's another thing that we kind of wanted to do is because Mech Warrior 3, I loved the mech creator in that. I spent so many hours just making mechs, and I kind of wanted to have that in this. So, you know, there's all of this stuff, and then there's a crafting system bolted on as well. So when you go finding stuff, you can build these systems and modules, and then, you know, add them on and everything.
Yeah, no, when I was looking it through, obviously beautifully designed. So hats off to you there, because obviously it looks incredible. As we were saying before, like when you showed us the sort of copy that you have, I was like, oh, that was going to look great on a coffee table or a book, as well as reading from it whilst you're doing your game. So fantastic work on that.
All credit to the artists on that one.
It is true, but I think it's so, but it's just so, because it's so eye-catching as well. This is the design of it, and obviously with the quick start as well, which I know is available for people to go and have a look at just now, is that you have obviously these sort of pre-generated characters already done, and actually I love how different they are in the quick start, I say. And you could also say for the core book as well. Is there a particular element that you folks really like, and you're like, oh, this is such a cool little bit that you designed? It's like something like, oh, I'm really glad that this is in there.
There's a couple of bits actually that I'm really sort of keen on. One is the scout and the snow globe that she's holding, which that was actually Francesco put that in, and he just put that in, and I was like, oh, that's just perfect.
That's
and
so
it's
cute.
like, little Arco in there, and also the credit to Panny on this one, the description of the modded laser pistol for the hacker. I'm really keen on because it's just I'll read it for you.
Yes, please.
It's a handheld laser pistol modded with additional RGB lights, see-through casing, and a synthesizer that makes appropriate laser sounds when fired. Which I thought was really nice because like there is this kind of weird tension actually in Salvage Union between kind of like hard sci-fi and more of a sort of fantasy, do whatever you want sort of thing. And there's like, to sort of represent that a bit is that sort of whole thing of, lasers don't actually make a noise when you fire them, right? But they feel like they should. So, a hacker would definitely mod that. So, yeah.
1,000%. And what about you, Panny?
I mean, as a slight aside in terms of the art, it is fantastic. We do have a great team on board, including Hamish Frater, Francesco Silva, and Alex Connolly, who have been creating some wonderful pieces. I often somewhat wryly joke that we're in the sort of coffee table book industry rather than the RPG industry.
1,000%. Why not? Why not?
Right.
We're art dealers, really.
But your RPG, it helps if it looks good, and more importantly, I think if how it looks evokes the world. And I think to actually answer the question, that's my most appealing aspect of it, is bringing that art and turning the mechanics and the setting information and all that to reflect the art and let people play in that world of the landscapes that Hamish Frater creates, or the wonderful pilot art that Francesco does, or the huge industrial mechs that Alex does, and just being able to control those and them working and doing cool stuff and being in that world is and I think we've nailed it there, to be honest. Like
absolutely.
I think it's quite strong. No,
absolutely. In the same way that Quest is obviously a very beautiful book itself and very sort of straightforward. I mean, you do yourselves down because everyone's, I think, will be brought in by the design. Yeah, it is definitely a coffee book. I would definitely have it on the table for people to look into it. But then the writing itself, as you were saying, Aled, it's like, it's very straightforward. There is a voice in there that evokes this feeling of like, here are the mechs. Here's that sort of that line between the hard sci-fi and the fantasy, and do whatever you want sort of thing. And that's great. I think I always find RPG books that you can just read. And then you're like, I want to play a game, because some people be like, I'm going to play a game, and they're like, okay, but I can do my own thing. This already invokes so much tone and feeling. It like, I can instantly say, I know what this game is, and I know like this is the voice in it, and I want to play that, if you see what I mean, rather than the other way around. Not that you're doing yourselves down, but the writing it definitely supports this, and I think it's just a beautiful combination on that front. So good job, guys.
Thank you. I mean, to be honest, as I write it, I find myself excited to play it, which I think must be a good sign.
Exactly.
It's just I want to play it more. I want to play test it. We've got so many more ideas. Anyway,
yes, that's a good question to go on to then. What could be a good story set in Salvage Union?
So really the core of play is, unsurprisingly, as the name implies, finding salvage within the wastelands, and a lot of early scenarios and adventures, including the scenario The Downing of Viaticos, which is one in Quick Start Guide, as well as the scenario Diogo is working on for us. He's the guy who wrote Hall of the Blood Kings, which I believe won an Emmy. And it's basically a race for salvage.
Got to do the name drop.
Yeah, you got to do it now.
Sorry, did I drop?
He's writing for us.
Pick it up just now. Yeah, put it back on your desk.
Where's that? Oh my God. Yeah, I do PR. What can I say? I'm shameless.
Can you say?
But long story short, I think the most fun stories initially are going to be a race for salvage. So you, other salvagers, wastelanders, and of course the Corpos, who are like the oligarchic corporations who still run the world and have a lot of power and resources, are all going to be hunting out for whether it's rare off minerals or a downed ship or a colossal mech that just crumbles. And all racing for that. But beyond that, there's a lot of scope. It's meant to be a sort of a bit of a kitchen sink setting in that way. In a way, I think we were inspired by like early 40K, where it wasn't quite set in stone and everything was quite eclectic, and got inspired from a lot of like different sources, like inspired by Dune and Alien and all sorts of other stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of influences in there, sort of like Mad Max, Fallout, Dune. Basically any post-apocalyptic desert setting, we've probably lifted something from them. And then same for all the different mech franchises. We've probably stolen a little bit from everything. Also, actually, I would just point out that all the corpos live in arcologies, and that is 100% lifted from SimCity 2000. Because I was fascinated by the concept of an arcology, and I was like, right, okay, yeah, that's the future of the world. And also a bit of 2000 AD as well, quite heavily for the wasteland sort of vibes.
That's awesome.
Story-wise, like for me, I was kind of very much of the opinion that you could basically write. You could write in political intrigue if you want, and then it's just all corporate espionage. And you might be Salvage Union, but you've been hired by some corpos to infiltrate another corporate arco, or something like that, or some sort of like really weird esoteric tales out in the wasteland, or there's so much that you can do with kind of a setting like that, which is why we're sort of designing a couple of different modes as well, so it's not just really campaign mode.
The core of play is split up into campaign mode, which we do see as the main mode, and that's meant for a sort of more traditional long-term game. You start off with a mech and pilot that you create yourself. We're going to add full character creation rules for both mechs and pilots, and they'll start off maybe with a few basic abilities. The mechs might be more lightweight and have a few basic weapons and systems and all that jazz, and then you'll go out into the wastes on your kind of Union crawler, which is your sort of your ship, which sort of, but it walks along, of course, in the wastes, and you'll go off that, pick up salvage, and then use all that salvage to upgrade your systems and mechs, and eventually get multiple mechs and encounter with the vast denizens of the wastes. And that's the sort of main exploration campaigny mode. And then to counter that, we've got mission mode, which is a more focused narrative driven thing, which is for like one shots or like maybe 2 to 3 sessions. And that's more like, hey, we need to blow up this dam, or we need to go and get this salvage, or we need to assassinate this target. Let's do it, and then the story goes from there.
I think for the mission mode as well, we'll probably have a broader sort of mech building sort of thing, because if you're just going to do a one shot, you want to be able to just pick and build your mech from kind of any of the parts that we supply. And then obviously the campaign is designed as you get your salvage, that you find out what your salvage is when you get back to the crawler, you filter through it and you pick out the parts that are good and work. And then obviously that gives you a list of components essentially that you can then use to craft the systems and modules in a sort of Minecrafty kind of way. Yeah, it sort of brings in that little bit of loot boxiness perhaps, but obviously you don't have to pay for them, so I think it's okay.
I'm always for introducing that with the GM or something, to be like, oh, you want that? It's 20 quid. What?
Yeah, no, microtransactions in your game, right? Why not?
Absolutely. I'm sure someone's done that on a D&D stream, and like, you want a natural 20? It's going to cost you. Let me get my card machine out.
Yeah, you can literally buy it. The most meta of meta currencies.
I think, unironically, I think some streams do that, don't they? Like you can pay, the audience can pay for a reroll, or
the admin can do it. Yeah, absolutely. If you're looking forward to 5 years, 10 years time, I wonder what your predictions are for RPGs in general. Obviously, you spoke briefly about your play testing and all that sort of thing. Obviously, this is your first sort of big venture as together as Leyline Press, even though you have your other ones as well. I guess, what do you think will be the sort of the predictions for RPGs, you think?
Ooh, that's
it's a big question.
That's a question.
There's no right answer, we know.
I think it's definitely the industry's definitely getting bigger, and I think it feels like the whole, I guess, geek or nerd sort of culture has opened up just massively in the last kind of 20 years anyway. Yeah, obviously the internet is producing a lot of independent designers and developers, and a lot of them are seeing actually quite great commercial success now. Things like Wander Home and stuff like that, games that just wouldn't have been made years ago. Like other stuff like Morkborg, wouldn't have been funded. I mean, it's a lovely book. It's an art book though. The layout's fantastic. I'm a big fan of Johann's, but no one in a commercial setting would approach a layout like that, because they'd say, how the hell am I supposed to read these rules? What is going on this page? I've no idea. No, that's not happening. That's, we're not doing that. And, it's like, which is such a shame. But then obviously, like, I think the type and variety that we're going to get is only going to expand. And like, you see it just in the last kind of like 5 years, what used to be considered like a crazy successful RPG Kickstarter that wasn't done by like Paizo or Wizards would be like, I don't know, a crazy successful one might be like 20 to 40,000 pounds. Now, like, you can Mothership like, nearly £1 million. Like, I mean, they may have broken 1 million now. I'm not sure. I checked yesterday and they were at like 950,000. And that's pounds as well, not dollars. They were all way over in dollars. And you're kind of like, they're a really small company, they're not like a big concern. And so, I mean, congratulations to them, like, love Mothership. But so I think it's only, that demonstrates that the market is there, I guess, is what I'm getting at, because, it's not the sort of like, it's not the 5e players, that are sort of, or the old school set in their ways guys that are necessarily buying this stuff. There has to be a new market for it. So I think maybe we've got in at the right time.
Definitely.
I mean, it's hard to predict the future. I mean, in 10 years' time on a personal level, I don't know, I might be laying bricks for all I know.
Don't manifest that, Panny. You're going to be like, success, manifest that.
Is that how it works?
No, I mean, quite honestly, though, given how much we get currently paid, which is to say nothing, being a bricklayer is actually quite profitable. As far as I'm aware. So, like,
that's why I'm making my official announcement. That I'm,
now on this podcast.
Right now on this podcast.
Okay.
I don't know. Like, I mean, as Alan said, obviously the industry is blowing up, and wider like geekdom and nerddom and Marvel and video games and all that jazz. It's hard to say. What I feel like I feel like it's sort of like how the video game industry was maybe 30 years ago-ish, like where it was like there was still a lot of indie companies popping up that were creating games. Like, I mean, we mentioned Sid Meier's Civilization, like Epic, he started on a small indie company. The name escapes me, or relatively small.
Firaxis Games.
Oh yes, Firaxis,
that's the one. And there was a lot of companies like that. Even EA at that time were like small fry. Even Nintendo really were small fry. Then relative to the other media giants.
Like Sony, Panasonic, and stuff like that, right? Like, they were tiny.
So I feel we're kind of in that space, and we're also in a space where, like, the manic miners, the bedroom coders of this world, can still do stuff and get like quite a lot of success with it, and even like mainstream success to a degree. And I guess the question is, like, is it a bit of a super happy bubble, or is it something that will continue and grow and increase? And then what does that look like?
I mean, I think it's one of those things, right? So I kind of have the feeling that because games, and particularly like tabletop games and stuff like that, is relatively recession proof as well, even if like the entire world, goes to, hell in a handcart, then we're like, as an industry, fairly insulated from that, just because of the fact that it's not an expensive hobby. I mean, it is, because obviously you buy every book and you buy all the special editions and you have like, shelves full of games that you never play. But, it doesn't have to be an expensive hobby, is what I'm trying to say.
But it's true. But people buy books all the time that they don't read, and then they keep them on their shelves, and you're like, move them and get rid of them. No. Like,
no. These are precious to me.
Yeah, exactly. But I do think there's, like you were saying, like, I do think there is weight in, like, you don't buy an RPG necessary to play it. You could just do it to read it. I know there's some people who just do that and they just enjoy reading through books
the reading like experience. But, I mean, I certainly do.
Yeah, and I completely agree as well, that idea that there is something for everyone. And obviously, beautiful thing with Kickstarter, all these funding platforms, like, you can put something out there and 100 people might go, love that, here's some money to do it. And you're right. I think it's at a time now where it is growing, and obviously we do have the big overlords of certain companies and stuff like that, but I think there's something beautiful, because if your game is beautiful and it's interesting and is that niche audience, those niche people are out there and they will find it. And it is that, unfortunately, it goes back to that whole signal boosting and marketing thing about, like, here's my game, it is good, and then they're like, yes, and so it is that now, and I think it's getting better as a result, because I think people are out there and they are looking for it. So it's an exciting time.
I think it's the one thing for me that would be like, I'm not sure what could potentially break it would be like if big companies started just buying up all the little studios, because that's what happened in the video game world, right? But then I'm not sure if that can ever actually happen either with like TTRPG, because the investment to actually make a game is so low. It's just writing and art and layout, I suppose. But there's a lot of ways around that. Yeah, I wonder. I don't know. Anyway, sorry, I'm rambling now.
Certainly,
it's a very great question.
I just always think it's quite interesting because you've now put together this amazing Kickstarter, which is doing incredibly well, and you've put out games as well. It is just interesting, I guess, to see maybe I guess it's the problem is always what is success? Is it numbers or is it people actually playing the game? Because what I've discovered through, and hopefully at some point touch wood that I'll be able to run Salvage Union for this podcast as well, is that I loved when I put it out there and link it back to designers, they'll go, oh, someone's played my game, brilliant, and they'll listen to it, and that's for me is amazing, because I'm like, oh, someone's listening to it. For obviously game designers, like, someone's played it and I wasn't involved.
Someone who picks it up on their own and then actually runs it and then tells you that they had a good time running it is like, it's the most heartwarming thing. It just makes you go, oh, it's like
but in a good that it is,
but in a positive way.
It's very positive way, and I think that's my thing. I hope that more people do actual plays of stuff and tag people in it so that you can see where your work has gone to in the world. So I guess our sort of penultimate question: if somebody was to run one of your games, whether it is Salvage Union or I appreciate obviously Shadow of Mog and Mutants as well, they're all very different in terms of topics. But if you had any advice for somebody who wanted to run one of your games, what would that advice be?
So I think the core of all our games sort of, I guess, goes back to what I was saying a bit earlier about like player agency. Like I think all our games are about like empowering players and empowering games masters to run the things that they want to run, and giving them like the framework and the structures and the cool art and setting to do that. That would be my takeout. Just like focus on that. Like focus on what your players want to do and let them do it. And that would be it. And I think all our games evoke that to one degree or another, but they are quite different in their many varied ways.
For me, it would be probably just my general sort of GMing advice, which is prepare nothing. Don't prepare anything at all, because it's completely pointless and you'll regret it. Maybe write about 4 or 5 sentences and call it a day. To be fair as well, though, that's kind of just touches on what Panny was saying. Like most of our games are designed kind of for that as well. Like either prepare nothing and run a module, or be prepared to improv. But I don't know. Sometimes it goes well, sometimes it goes badly, though. To be fair, but I never used to like running modules, because I was always kind of like, no, it's fine. We'll just I'll make something up. And now when you've got like a lot more maybe on your mind and you're thinking about different things, I'm kind of like, no, actually modules are brilliant. I'm going to just write loads of modules. And modules are amazing. Let's buy all of them and never run them, obviously, because I'll present them all on a map for the players to go to the various areas, and they will inevitably say, well, yeah, but there's a bit of sea here. Can we get on a pirate boat, please, and go out to an island? And then eventually we had to write Isle of Glaslyn, and then that's how that came about.
And you're like, but there's no modules there. Well, great.
So we'll just keep sailing around the world, going to places where you haven't purchased any content for. But prepare nothing. That's mine.
To add to that, so we'd hope that the stuff we create provides a lot of structure and information and tools and utilities, so that when a games master comes to pick up and run the modules we have or learn the systems, that they have everything they need to feel confident to run the game, even if they're somewhat light on prep. And I do agree, like you can certainly over prep. I think a little bit of prep, for me at least, is useful.
Wait,
was that sorry, Panny, was that a really, really bad PR answer that I just threw out?
Well, just don't buy any of our stuff. Just don't worry about it. Just
don't prep, just no modules.
Just take a D6 and go to town. And
take a D6 and a notepad is all you need, really.
Invite your friends, right?
I didn't even take a notepad to the woods once. I carved a dice out of a bit of wood.
No, but I see both sides of it. Like I definitely am someone who always used to over prep, and now it's just like it's having the confidence to do that. That's the thing. It's just like to go in and not panic that you've not done enough prep or you've done no prep. It's like embrace it and lean into it a little bit. Like you've got the system, you can refer to it, and it is helpful. Like in that sense, it's like here's the stuff you need, but you can read it through just a couple of times. You don't need to write copious amounts of notes. You don't have to do stuff. So I think both answers are good. It is a good PR answer. Don't worry, Alan.
It's a true answer. I like game structures. I like game structures. That's what I like. Things that help prompt me to know what to do next.
Yeah, absolutely. So where can we find your work? What's coming up for Leyline Press, and what are your plans for the future?
Well, the Kickstarter campaign for Salvage Union is now absolutely live. Hopefully, by the time you're hearing this, fingers crossed, it's funded. And you can find that if you just search Salvage Union on Kickstarter. You can also visit our website, leyline.press. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Leyline Press, and you can also follow Salvage Union at Salvage Union. Upcoming projects, we've got a lot of ideas coming up. I know, Alan. Anything you want to highlight?
Oh, well, I mean, that's the thing. What are we talking about? Next Zine Quest, we will be releasing Werewolves, the long-awaited sequel to Mutants, which is about dogs rather than the cats. Yeah, that one I'm sort of excited for because it's a nice light project. Like obviously we did Andromeda for Mothership, and then we've done Salvage Union, which is obviously a big project, and then it'll be nice to get back to something a bit sort of lighter. We've got a couple of other things that we're working on as well, which we're sort of quite excited about. One that I'm particularly excited about, but I think we're probably not really discussing.
Don't discuss anything you don't want to commit yourselves to, or
exactly.
Like that. So no worries. Oh, that's exciting.
But Werewolf's the next one on the radar, and there's also our Patreon as well, where we do something every month. So we probably were remiss not to discuss that.
Yeah, I was just saying, to Patreon, we send you an old school Essentials, which is a BXD&D module every month. We do it in digital and in Rhizo printed form. And indeed, I think our main focus is really going to be Salvage Union this year, and other stuff may come up, but I think that's really going to be a core. We're just going to try and make that as good as possible for when it fulfills.
Again, because I know you folks are in London, I know you've been doing some play tests of Salvage Union. Do you have any of those coming up soon, or are you doing them on a regular basis for people who are in London who want to have a go at this system?
Yeah, so actually you can join the Salvage Union Discord, which you can find links for on our website, leyline.press, and we're running weekly playtest games there. I'm running some, my good friend Lloyd is running some as well, and we're encouraging people to come in and run playtests and whatnot too. In terms of in-person playtests, watch this space. We live in difficult times to meet up, unfortunately. But we are planning in-person meetups and playtests and stuff like that as well in London.
Yeah, and of course, Discord is the perfect place to do some playtests and just to meet like-minded people who love mechs and doing RPGs. So amazing. Brilliant. Thank you so much, guys. It's been absolutely wonderful to talk to you. I've been really enjoying this the quick start, and fingers crossed for the Kickstarter. I manifesting it. It's going to be successful. You're going to have an amazing time. And it's all good.
Thanks very much.
I'm hoping to do more of these special Q&A bonus episodes in future, including Q&As on the one-shots we've run here at What Am I Rolling? If you have a question or you know an RPG designer you would like to see interviewed on this podcast, let us know via the email address. That's whatamirollingpodcast@gmail.com. And that's it. Great. Thanks.